Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 a.m., so we'll kick into this. My name's Matt Patterson. I'm COO at Kinetics here, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this month's webinar. And the topic is quite a provocative one. The question of, are you really insured for cyber attack? And I think that's a two-sided coin, because not only is it, are you insured for cyber attack if you already have cyber insurance? It's the question that you need to ask yourself is, do you have the right protections in place for you to be able to get cyber insurance? So, whether you've got cyber insurance or if you don't, there's probably people who are in both categories on the call today. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper in this webinar. So we've got an agenda which includes our guest, Duncan Morrison from Aon. Welcome, Duncan. Good to have you on the call.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's good to join another Kinetics event, and it's always nice to be able to add what we can. So, no, thanks for inviting me.
No, our pleasure, our pleasure. So we'll go through an agenda in the next slide, just sort of covering off what we're wanting to achieve out of this webinar, but a few housekeeping notes. For this session, we are recording it, and we do that every month so that we have a video that you can share with your teams if they're unable to make this call, and it's useful for education purposes. Your microphones are on mute at the moment, but you can use the chat function to ask any questions via Teams. And Scott, in his usual way, is there to curate those questions, and he'll bring them to the fore as and when required. And we'll also post a copy of the presentation in the chat afterwards so that you've got a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to, again, refer to your teams or use it for learnings that you might need post this. So before I actually kick into the presentation overview, Duncan has been involved in a number of events. Duncan works for Aon New Zealand, and they're also our cyber insurer from an MSP perspective. We've been working with them for many years, and Duncan's involvement with Kinetics most recently has been in a couple of incident response tabletop exercises, and that's where we've gathered groups of clients together and we've run them through a scenario of a live cyber attack, and what you do with that and the processes you go through. And what Duncan has been able to add to those sessions has been really hugely valuable, because his role is actually going out there talking to businesses like Kinetics, but also to like Kinetics customers about what you can expect, how you should deal with things, and how you could get those protections in place. Duncan, do you mind just talking a little bit about perhaps those previous events and the types of things you're doing in market at the moment and what you're seeing?
Yeah, no, sure. I would like to. I think those workshop events, firstly, have been, like you said, might have been valuable to be attending, but it was valuable for me as well, because it did match what what we do see in terms of when incidents are occurring. I really like the workshops and the way that they've been facilitated, and I would recommend, if you haven't had a chance to get along to one, the next time that they are produced, to get along to. Just the way in which the facilitator generally goes through, and there's always the odd curveball and something that hasn't worked in the plan that you thought might have worked, or a control that maybe hasn't quite done what was expected, or whatever that might be. And this matches across really well to the real world examples that we see. When we're helping or taking a watching brief or an advocacy sort of role as part of an incident response. We've got the specialist vendors involved, the forensics, and the client's own IT teams. During these events and with these things unfolding, you often do see things deviating from the plan or from what sort of might have been expected. So the way in which those workshops do mimic that is definitely worthwhile being in, and it sort of helps you frame your thoughts when you take that back to the business around how we have to have a plan, but we also have to be quite adaptable. So I mean, that's just one part of that. And yeah, in terms of what we're doing in the world, in sort of our world in terms of cyber insurance and the advice we're giving, I think a lot of it is around, either making sure that insureds are insurable, and then, once they have an insurance policy, or even if they don't, just making sure that that readiness for an event and being cyber resilient is sort of up there on the priorities.
Good call. Good call. Thanks, Duncan. So over to the presentation, what we're going to cover today. So we are going to run through quickly those recommended protections that you should have in place. And first place to start is really the recommendations that come from CertNZ, and this is straight out of their playbook as to the expectations. But what is quite interesting is that there's some additional checks and measures that are in place with regards to cyber insurance today, and the landscape is changing. Okay, so it's really important for you to keep in contact with Kinetics as your service provider. Understand the latest that we have in our offerings, but also we rely on our relationships with organizations like Aon and with Duncan to make sure that we're aligning to their expectations as well, because we don't want you to be caught out. And then the second part of it is really going to be from Duncan's perspective, the expectations from cyber insurance companies. What are they seeing from their perspective, and what do they need from their customers to make sure that they're in the right place. So those protections, if you're a Kinetics Foundation customer or Care for Security customer, you're already well aware of these things. But if you're not, the regular hardware patching and software updates is just a thing that we do as a regular course. And people underestimate how important that is. There has to be someone in your environment doing those things. You've got to have strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. The detection, protection and response tooling, that includes things like MDR and EDR tools that are available in our services. And then there's the human component, which is the employee training and awareness, all key basics. But when you drill down a little bit deeper, the importance of making sure that all of that software and hardware is up to date from a BIOS protection, from a patching perspective, is so critical. That if that is not done, there's very simple ways in which cyber criminals can actually infiltrate your environment. And then a clear process and a regular update patch cycle. That's one of the things that you rely on us to do. We do it in the background, and we guarantee that it's done on a regular basis across what we manage, which is about 4,600 endpoints across all of our clients. Really important to reinforce this, the strong passwords and multi-factor authentication. Strong passwords aren't passwords that you use all the time across multiple different systems. They are absolutely things that are reinforced by good password managers, and we have Passportal as part of our service for that. And it's really important that everyone is using those things, particularly in any RDP or RDS environments, which need to be strongly protected. And then the multi-factor authentication is an absolute standard. CertNZ says that this is a notifiable breach issue. If there's not multi-factor authentication in place, there will be consequences for directors going forward. And employee training and awareness. Now, we approach this in a number of different ways. As part of our standard service, we have a cybersecurity briefing, which we actually deliver on your premise. We'll come out and talk to you about the latest trends, what people are seeing as far as social hacking and any sort of environmental security things that need to be taken into account. And as part of that, you get the opportunity to ask Q&A from a qualified person from our Cambium team. Then we also have cyber phishing, and that's where we're sending phishing emails to you to actively try to catch out your employees to make sure that they're actually recognizing the threats as they're coming in via their inbox. But then there's also the online cybersecurity training that we get your teams to do, and there's often learning moments there where they can actually learn about the types of cyber attacks that are coming in to your organization or in the society around them, whether you're at a cafe or using Wi-Fi and things like that, to bring people up to speed. And so this people component is a very important part of our entire service.
Yeah, and sorry, just Matt, I mean, I know we're going to get into the cyber piece very shortly, but just on that people and awareness and the training, I think in the past we've often had feedback from customers thinking it's sort of a nice to have, but not necessarily critical.
Yeah,
But it very much is an area which the insurers are keen to understand what kind of work goes on in there within organizations. I mean, we know that at the moment around sort of 40% of that first sort of loss vector, or sorry, attack vector, comes by phishing or someone making that mistake. And
absolutely.
and it's only expected to increase as these threat actors are using AI and other technology to make their attempts more sophisticated. So some of those things that we look out for, are changing and becoming harder to spot. So as that sort of increases, it just becomes more of a control that is relatively simple to do, that insurers
Yes.
are wanting to understand. So yeah, I mean, like, all controls are obviously important, but yeah, that one there, I think sometimes feels like it's a nice to have, but is sort of just as critical as some of these others.
Yeah, absolutely, Duncan. And from Kinetic's perspective, working with our Cambium team, we've always thought the most important part of any sort of change or any sort of education is actually the people, and just making sure that we've got the right measures in place so that our customers and users can actually come up to speed with the latest of cyber threats that come through. So you're spot on.
Mm.
So, look, this one is really right up your alley, Duncan, around how cyber insurers assess risk. So I'll get you to sort of take the audience
Yeah,
through some of these key things.
no, happy to. And I think one of the questions that we sort of asked at the start of the webinar, or part of the introduction to what the webinar would be about, is around those questions and what we should be thinking about for the next cyber insurance renewal, or what we should be looking at in terms of, is our coverage right, or can we get coverage? I think maybe to scale it back, it's worthwhile understanding, first of all, how the cyber insurers are going to have a look and assess your risk, and whether or not they provide insurance, and then also what that insurance looks like, which is
Mm,
that question around, are we covered? Yeah, and often that will depend on how the insurer assesses and how we present that. So I guess, taking a step back, how insurers are approaching cyber risk, they sort of look at two different fronts, right? The characteristics of the business, and then what the business is doing to manage cyber risk. Um, the characteristics of the insured business generally aren't really something that you can change a lot as an insured. You might be, a law firm, or you might be a retailer, or whoever it might be. You can't really change those factors. You can't
yeah,
change your sort of annual revenue, your staff size, that sort of thing. So that sort of thing we can't move the needle much on. Where the wins can, and also that forms part of the rating and the pricing. If you're a higher risk industry, your pricing and the way that the insurer goes about things is obviously going to be a little bit more circumspect than, say, you're deemed more of a lower risk. So that's sort of
do you
the
mind
set in
talking
stone
about
piece.
do you mind sort of mentioning some of the higher risk industries, from an
Yeah,
insurer's perspective?
yeah. I think from an insurer's perspective, I mean, obviously, the larger the organization, the sort of more concern that, well, not concern, but the more rigor that they apply in terms of underwriting, but also um, insureds that might hold a relatively large amount of sensitive or critical information that could be of value. Likewise, when we think about how cyber insurance also provides cover for interruption from a cyber event. So organizations like manufacturers and logistics, supply chain, that sort of thing, where
Yeah,
a small event can actually have quite an impact on ability to
sure,
operate. So
sure.
so those kind of industries. So we're talking sort of professional services, healthcare, as well as transport, logistics, manufacturing, as sort of the areas which do tend to be the harder to place, or
Thanks for that.
more underwritten areas. But putting that aside, in terms of how the insurers then look to underwrite your approach to cyber controls and processes, there's some key areas which they are trying to understand what you're doing in those places, and and it's important that, if you're doing work in these places, that we are getting that forward to insurers when they are assessing. Now, they're not making requirements that every single thing on their wish list has to be done, but they want to see work done in most of these areas. And you'll see that actually just aligns with similar to what CERT recommends, or even what I'm sure Kinetics are recommending around what you should be doing. So things around access controls, protection, EDR, so the endpoint detection response, monitoring, that sort of thing. Patching and software management, also a key insurers are wanting to understand. I mean, I think the numbers are around 98 0-day vulnerabilities reported last year, so that's 2 a week effectively. So, that gives an opportunity for these threat actors to get in. So patching then becomes even more critical. That there's a process and it's done in a timely manner, and people understand what that is. Backup and continuity processes. I mean, this is something that maybe isn't sort of seen as the front line in terms of defense, but is critical when we're talking about cyber insurance, because the quicker an organization can recover in the insurer's eyes, the less this claim is going to cost them, or the less they're likely to have to pay out in interruption costs and things like that. And it also means you do have a bit of an upper hand, right, with the threat actor. So, you've got sound backup and recovery procedures that are not likely to be impacted or haven't been impacted. You're going to rebound from a cyber event a lot quicker than organizations that don't quite have that in place. That training and awareness point, something we've already sort of been across. And then that last one I thought I'd add there is just, especially as you get large organizations, that the culture and reporting of cyber. So what we're talking about there is are you taking proactive steps towards cyber security, and realizing that it's an ongoing journey, not just a destination to reach. Does cyber posture and that sort of thing get reported up to, say, boards or management? If something goes wrong, what kind of reporting? So it's about building that culture of, it's one of the things that is obvious within the business.
Well, I think that's an important one, Duncan, because a lot of our clients will see us coming to them with updates to security services, and I think that the realization is that once you've got a security service in place, it's never going to stay static, and there are going to be things that come in from threat actors which are going to introduce new threats which are going to require new protections. And so when it comes down to it, that's the relationship that we have with our clients, to make sure that they've got the latest available to them, notifying them of all of the updates so that their protections are, they have peace of mind that they are protected for the new things. But unfortunately, these things also have an impact on cost. So the balance has to be just right for each client.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we talk about cyber loop at Aon quite often, and it sort of maps out the areas and sort of stages that we're able to support or pass through support to our clients. But it's I mean, taking a step back, it's the sustained loop for cyber resilience, right? It's assessing, mitigating, transferring, and then responding, and just continuing that loop around and around to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to be cyber resilient and being ongoing in that. Yeah. Cool.
Right. On to the next one.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is sort of a summary graphic of the key areas that insurers are looking at. Like I said, depending on your type of business and the size, the amount of these that need to be in place can vary, or to what level that those are in place. But that top row there is just about universal amongst most markets around, cyber insurance markets, around what they're wanting to see their insureds doing, and they're those sort of defense, physical controls, and training. And then the rest of the list is sort of in varying degrees that we see coming in terms of insurers wanting their clients to have. So vulnerability scanning, patch management, what we've talked about already, that's normally a non-negotiable as well. And things like email filtering, having disaster recovery and backups, all of those sorts of things. And then just depending on how sophisticated the business is, some of these other control areas insurers are wanting to see. that incident response plan and ransomware event planning. You know, that being ready for an event, or you know, having done simulations or having ransomware playbooks, or having an incident response plan does definitely add value and strengthens
Mm,
an insurance submission.
mm. So it's interesting looking at this, as you say, the foundation ones up the top, and then things that move down that stack that may be required in the future. And I think that's something that really comes up when our clients are going through their cyber insurance renewals or applying for cyber insurance for the first time.
Mm.
In just about every case, they're coming to us asking us to, have a look at what their current environment and then what they need to tick the boxes for cybersecurity, cyber insurance policies. And we certainly help provide information so that they can make that response. But this is one of the key drivers, as the industry, from an insurance perspective, their expectations go up. um, it actually just changes the bar on a regular basis. So again, reinforcing the fact that it's not just a set and forget. You don't do it once and then expect it to be right 3 years later, because it is going to change.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think the the proposal forms that cyber insurers would have asked for, um, sort of like 2018, 2019 versus today, uh,
Yeah,
are a hell of a lot different. There's a lot more
yeah,
questions, and the type of information they're after is more. I mean, that's because I think cyber security and the way that we manage it has moved on quite a lot in that time, but
correct.
also because they weren't asking enough and understanding risk well enough, that sort of um, meant that there was a really hard part of the cyber insurance market through 2020, 2021, 2022. And these cyber insurance markets had to go on a fairly quick journey of understanding what actually makes good cyber risk and what doesn't, and
Mm,
really looking at their claim data to understand what that is. So yeah, while it looks like it, we've had a bit of a jump up in terms of what's required in terms of information to underwrite. And then there's often each year when you come to renewal, there might be a few extra questions or changes. I think it's probably not the bar increasing, it's just the bar moving with the times. And
yeah,
like you
true,
say,
true.
it's not a destination at all. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, good call. Yeah,
cool.
thank you for clarifying that.
No, no problem.
um, so moving on, consequences of inadequate
Yeah.
protection.
Yeah, I think, like, I mean, going back to that first question around, the questions we should be asking at renewal, or if we're going for cyber insurance and what that might look like. I mean, having these controls in place, certainly if you're doing everything well, it's going to look great in an insurance submission, and you're likely to get some good terms from your insurer out of it. And if you do have insurance or looking for insurance, and the premium will be not as expensive as it might be for lesser risks. The reality is, though, that those controls that we saw on the prior page, and having enough of them in place to satisfy the insurer, it's not really moving the premium as much. That sort of premium factor is generally based upon your industry, your size, and your general approach. But those controls are more likely to make the difference between whether you can get cover or not. So not
Okay,
what the premium's going to do, it's whether you can get cover or not. And then once it's sort of okay to get cover, then how much cover you'll be getting, or whether there'll be restrictions on the policy. So sometimes we
right,
see clients who might not have MFA across, all remote access, or all applications that, store critical data or whatever that might be. And if that's the case, the insurer might look to put a sublimit on for ransomware events, or
mm,
business email compromise events, or something like that. So
yeah,
it'll be looking out for those kind of conditions that are placed on the policy. You might have an okay premium and a policy limit, but it's asking those questions around any of those endorsements or conditions that are put on a policy that might restrict things down because you haven't got a particular control or
interesting.
process in place. So
Yeah,
it's those controls. We're not moving the needle a hell of a lot on premium, but it's moving it on the actual coverage you're getting, which is possibly more important, because you don't want to come to an event thinking that you've got
and
the
be,
coverage in place, and there's some restrictions depending on what's gone wrong. So
yeah, good
that's just
point.
something to note, and those are the sort of the key questions and areas to look at renewal.
Good
And
stuff.
just probably more to that control piece. these controls that the insurers are looking for, then they're not sort of just arbitrarily selected by the insurers either. I mean, I know we don't expect that, but just to be clear, their previous events that they've insured or claims they've had and the learnings from that drives the questions they ask. They see trends in terms of, well, okay, we're seeing this is causing a lot of cyber events to our clients, or this is exacerbating the impact of a cyber event. We're going to ask a few
That's
more questions around this and understand, because we think good practice is this, so we want to get that a bit more. Yeah.
yeah, and as their risk landscape changes, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have, and some insurers will have slightly different questions based on the experience they've had with their clients. But cyber insurers now, particularly in larger risks, will start asking around the types of privileged accounts you have and how that's managed and things like that, because they've found that if those accounts are accessed by a threat actor, it exacerbates the impact of the cyber event tenfold, and really can mean for quite expensive and quite costly and time consuming events for the clients. So
Mm,
they're making sure that the questions around those areas that do have the potential to cause or make an event worse are asked.
that's
Um,
good.
and I guess at the end of it, day, it's like, regardless of if you're buying cyber insurance or not, having an understanding around the expectations of what makes a good cyber insurance risk. You could drop off the insurance part, and what makes you a good cyber risk in terms of your response to cyber risk and your cyber posture. That insurance framework around what they're looking to see, take insurance away from it. It's still a really good framework to be guided by, because most of that framework's driven by real life examples of events occurring, and then if these controls were in place or all working well, the insurers believe it would have had a lesser impact on the event. So it's
Yeah,
worthwhile
good point.
striving towards those things, right? So even if you're not
Yeah.
buying the insurance, it's still worth sort of recognizing or assessing yourself against some of those controls. So
Yeah, you did right. And we put
mm,
similar processes in place around our kinetics method to make sure that we're sort of cycling back where people are at and making sure we're highlighting whether there are gaps and the like. So good practice. So thanks for that, Duncan. Um,
problems.
so look, just coming to the end of our webinar now. Obviously, we've talked specifically about cyber attack prevention and the things that you can put in place. And these are services that Kinetics actually provide on an ongoing basis to our clients, to varying levels. And then from the perspective of what the cyber insurance industry are expecting, hopefully the information that you've heard today has sort of helped give you more of a rounded view from both perspectives, because we're all looking at this changing environment around cyber insurance and in cyber threats. We need to make sure that the right things are in place to protect our organizations going forward. Can I just say to you, Duncan, you've really provided some thought-provoking ideas and feedback for today's session. And I would actually just then pass over, is there any questions from the audience that while you're here, we've got an opportunity to respond to? Over to you.
We don't have any immediate questions, but if anyone wants to
Okay,
put them through, please type them in. It's been very comprehensive. Thanks, Duncan and Matt.
no problem. So
No
I
worries.
will, while we're waiting for that to come in, or whether they do come in or not, I will promote our next webinar, which is on Wednesday, the 20th of November. There's a QR code for you to sign up for that, and that's practical AI. So turning your 365 data into an actual Copilot AI resource. And Ben and our Cambium team will be talking about how you can actually create those specific co-pilots within your environment to actually extract real value, but also around making sure that your data is in shape to be able to take advantage of AI. So that's pretty much it. Still no questions as yet, so we can probably wrap up on time. On behalf of Kinetics, thanks very much, Duncan, for attending this session, and a standout performance as usual. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks. It's always good to join, and good to see what you guys are doing, and how you're providing your clients with this kind of information. It's really good to see.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Yeah.
And thanks to all our customers for taking time out of their busy schedules to attend. So we'll be in touch soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.